Hello, everybody. We hope that you enjoyed our opening ceremonies, and thanks for being here with us at our workshop on the wage gap and strategies to overcome it with Dr. Kelly Nash. Dr. Nash is a professor of physics in the Department of Physics and Astronomy here at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She also serves as Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the UTSA College of Sciences and the Director of the Kleberg Advanced Microscopy Center at the UTSA College of Sciences. She also served previously as the Graduate Advisor of Record. Her scientific research focuses on synthesis and characterization, nanomaterials, and their physical interaction with biological systems from the molecular to the cellular level. She also has a lot of awards to her name. She was awarded the Air Force Office of Scientific Research Young Investigator Program Award in 2015 for research efforts in biophysics. Additionally, she has numerous awards for her contributions to science and promotion of inclusiveness in STEM, including the Dillard University Alumni 40 Under 40 Award, the UTSA College of Science Excellence in Community Service Award, and the San Antonio Business Journal 40 Under 40 Award. She also received the UTSA President's Distinguished Diversity Award. She continually advocates for the involvement of underrepresented groups in science through strategic initiatives within UTSA and abroad. She has served as UTSA American Physical Society Bridge Program Coordinator, Facilitator for APS, Professional Development and Skills for Women, and Chair of the APS Conferences for Undergraduate Women in Physics National Organizing Committee. So let's go ahead and get some claps in the chat, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Kelly Nash.
Well, thank you, Janelle, for the wonderful, wonderful introduction. I am very honored to be here today and to really talk about negotiation skills. I'm very passionate about this topic. As you will see, I have worked with the American Physical Society in the past on a series of workshops and, that included developing content to help women to address negotiation gaps and wage gaps early on in their careers. So a lot of material that you will see here, some of it is sourced from that American Physical Society program. I've also included some other materials. I also want to preface that while the workshop materials, a lot of things that you will see will focus on women, most of the information that I share today applies to women and anyone from a minoritized group, whether it's gender or racial minoritized groups. These tips can really help you as you go along and move along in your careers. So I always like to give my audience a little bit of introduction about myself and who I am. How do I see myself? And so I always have this "Who am I?" slide. So as Janelle mentioned, I'm a professor of physics. I'm an associate dean for faculty at UTSA. So I do a lot of different aspects of my career focus on not only research as a faculty member, but also training and development of students and faculty. So, my little nugget is I like to think I'm a physicist. I'm a developer of people and help lead people. But, I always think my family thinks that I just spend my entire day looking at equations, right? They always think of, oh, she's a physicist, so E equals MC squared. My friends think that I'm a rocket scientist for some reason. I think, society views physicists as just sitting in a lab, smashing around atoms. What I think I do is, I really think I encompass all of the great women and minority scientists that have come before me. And so I'm a physicist, so I have all of these aspirational people that I try to carry on their legacy. I do think I'm a little bit of Mae Jemison. So maybe my friends are right in saying that I'm a rocket scientist. What I really do most of my day is I am sending emails, I'm at the computer, writing papers, getting out grants, developing all of those faculty. And what I tell people I love to do is train people. And I'm very happy to say that I have a diverse research group, and this is just a snapshot of my infamous Twitter post that I highlight all of the women that I have mentored through the years in my lab that have gone on to do great things. All of these women have gone on to get PhDs and are working for great companies and universities around the US. So I want to start off our conversation today, and this is going to be an interactive conversation. So no matter what platform you're on, just make sure you're at your keyboard. I'm going to throw out some questions, and definitely feel free to ask questions throughout the program here. We'll answer those questions as we get to the end. I also want you to, I'll put up some prompts and I want to hear from you and get some feedback from the audience. And Janelle's going to help me with this in a little bit. So let's start with the first warm up exercise. Remember, we're all in this together. Join in, type your answers in the chat. We really want to blow that chat up and get lots of feedback. So we're here and we're going to talk about negotiations. And so I want to begin by asking, what have you ever negotiated for in your life? And maybe Janelle, you can kind of help read off some of those in the comments.
For sure. I will read them off as they come in. We're on a bit of a delay with the stream too, a few seconds. So for any of you, if you're like, oh, my comment's not getting shared, that is why.
So we'll let those comments come in, and but really think about all aspects of your life. A lot of times we tend to think about, well, I negotiate for a job maybe, or that's what I'm planning to negotiate for. Just think about anything you negotiated for. Maybe it was, you wanted to go shopping and you had to go to your parents to ask for money, and then you really wanted some outfit, and maybe it had to be a negotiation, right? Maybe it was about the price of the outfit. So think about that. What have you negotiated for? And I'm going to argue we all have negotiated for something in our life.
We just got a bunch of them that came in. So Natalie said, negotiated with my parents to go on a road trip.
Oh, that's a good one. So negotiate for fun.
Yes. And then we have another more serious one for the price of a car.
Nice. All right. Yeah, this is a common one that we all may reach in our lives. So that's a great, important milestone.
We also have someone who's negotiated in a foreign country before. That sounds difficult.
That sounds difficult. I know I've been in like a foreign market and you have a language gap, but I think negotiation is negotiation, right? So if you want a fair price for goods, it's good to have that skill of negotiation. So great.
And that's what Jenny said as well, negotiating for a price in markets. We also have Lisette, who's negotiated a price on a house.
All right. So great. Yeah, I think these are some common ones. My favorite negotiation, I tell my husband, is we just got some new furniture because I'm sitting at home in the pandemic, and I'm like, this furniture is old and ugly. So I'm just super excited about going to a furniture store because I negotiate the prices in a furniture store. The big box stores all the way down to the small stores. You can negotiate. One more?
A few more. I was just going to read out the rest that are here. Kelly said, I've negotiated to change schools. Stephanie's negotiated the price of a chess table in Mexico. Dalam has negotiated with her little brother to take away the remote. Eileen said, negotiated on my bedtime on the weekends.
Awesome.
So
we all have great experience with negotiating. I want you to think about, in that negotiation, though, what was the natural strength that you brought to the negotiation? Was it your confidence? Was it, was it that you were able to think quickly on your feet? What's the thing that you think your strongest asset that you bring to a negotiation? And I'll give everybody a moment to really think about that. Just think about one thing that you're good at. I'm super excited, because I know there's some good assets that people have.
I know everybody already had a lot that they negotiated on, and the amount of negotiations in like foreign countries or with like a language barrier as well is like shocking for this group. So
Yes, yes, definitely.
the last ones kind of came in all at once. I'm assuming there's a lot in the chat.
Oh,
We're getting some in right now. Somebody said that they're not sure what their strength is.
and that's okay. You know, sometimes we have to figure out what that strength is, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today.
We also have Natalie, who has a good ability to compromise.
All right. And compromising is a negotiation strategy. And so I think those are all acceptable answers in this audience. So great.
We also have Kelly, who said, I used to be good at finding lost things. So maybe something, oh, maybe they've negotiated for lost things or something like that. Oh, we have Delam, who said finding out what the other person wants and using that.
All right. That's great. And we're going to talk about that. That's what we call knowing the other person's position. So we'll talk about that.
We also have Lisette, who said, understand the value of whatever is being negotiated.
Okay. Yeah. So value. So understanding what we call the value proposition. We'll talk about that. So that's great. Great. So I just have one more question before we dive in. How comfortable are you with negotiating? So really think about that. How do you feel when you negotiate? Are you super excited? I mentioned I like to go, negotiate for furniture. I'm not so sure if I'm able to negotiate, as well for a car. I think, because I'm super excited about the vehicle and seeing myself driving the vehicle. That I tend to forget sometimes my negotiation skills. But
Yes.
yeah.
So we have a few that came in. Lisette says, quite uncomfortable, actually. Eileen says, depends on who I'm negotiating with.
Oh, so that's a who yeah. If does the person make you feel comfortable? Are you negotiating with someone that kind of throws you off balance and you can't become a quick thinker? That's definitely something that makes negotiation difficult.
And then we have Kelly, who actually says that they feel some confidence. So that's great.
So that's great.
And we have Jenny, who says, I feel like I still need to be more confident on my offers.
Well, awesome. I think everybody, has definitely some strengths that they bring to negotiations. They are have varying levels of how comfortable we are with negotiations. And so we're going to talk about some strategies today. But before we go into strategies, I want to talk a little bit. Uh-oh, did I lose my screen? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about why are we here? Why do we want to even talk about negotiations? And so just as we saw in the previous slide, I told you negotiations happen everywhere. And it's important when you're negotiating with someone to know your purpose and your goal in that negotiation. So you want to remember to focus on what's important. Don't let your ego or your fears, which we heard some people say they're uncomfortable, don't let a distraction get in your way, because the person you're negotiating with, that may be their tactic to distract you so that they can get the win out of the negotiation, right? Another important thing is, as you think about your purpose and your goals, you want to be able to choose your battles. And when I say choose your battles, you want to know when to continue to negotiate. And sometimes we, in fact, have to walk away from a negotiation. So, how do you know when to walk away, right? In a negotiation, typically it's, the most of the negotiations we deal with are one-on-one. It can be in a group setting. But particularly in those one-on-one situations, make sure you don't personalize the negotiation. It's about you in your role, not you as a person when you're negotiating with someone else. And it's really not about the personality or demeanor of that person. they're working, typically, if you think about negotiating for a job, they're working for a company, and they're there for the greater interest of the company. And so sometimes if you personalize that interaction as you go through the negotiation, that can stall the process. And as a personal, to protect yourself as you go through a negotiation, don't internalize that other person's behavior. um, Typical examples of where you don't want to internalize: once you're in the workforce and maybe you have a supervisor that you're negotiating with, and sometimes they're just so bullheaded that you just really can't make any headway in a negotiation. And so you have to know, when is it the right time to go around that person, over or under that person, to get what you need in a negotiation. And you also want to, finally remember to control the controllables, right? What are the things that we can control? We can control how we feel in the moment when we're in negotiation, right? What are the tactics we can use to keep ourselves calm, to keep a steady approach? Those are the controllables in a situation when you negotiate. So there's different types of negotiation. At times, you may be requesting things. This means you may be requesting, for example, a specific salary when you start a new job. You may be on a job and you're asking for things to change. Maybe you have an idea about how to team up with your colleagues to accomplish a specific task. And so, how do you negotiate with your boss or supervisor to ask for change in your organization? And then one that I commonly see that I think applies even to undergraduates and graduate students: deciding on responsibilities. If you're in a class and doing a group project, if you are in a laboratory doing research, how do you decide whose responsibility it is to take lead on a certain part of the research project, right? Those are places where negotiation is important. You can think about on a lab, on a school project or a research project. Getting credit that you deserve for your contribution is important for your career. So what we don't want to happen is when we see our scary guy here, right? The person you're negotiating with, and they come with the anger, and this is a tactic, right? You don't want them to throw you off balance. So you want to stay cool in those moments when someone is really trying to throw you off balance. And remember, as we go along, if you have questions as they come to you, definitely type them in the chat. Janelle is going to capture those so we can start to ask questions later on in this session. So I'm going to give you some examples of, again, why are we here? One of the themes of this session is the pay gap. And we have lots of data around gender pay gap. Unfortunately, we don't have as much. It's very hard to pick out the nuances around different genders other than men and women. But I would argue, again, the type of disparities we see among women happen amongst other gender minorities. So definitely take some of these examples and the same techniques apply. So this was an interesting article that came out in 2017. And so the headlines read, BBC women let gender pay gap happen. This is what a government advisor says. If you all know the BBC, they're in the United Kingdom. And these were a group of women who worked for a news outlet, and some interesting things came out. So what happened is the British government commissioned a report. Businessman Sir Philip Hampton, who at the time was led GlaxoSmithKline, which is a pharmaceutical company. He dug in, see what's going on here. Why is there this pay gap between these women? And so here are some quotes. He says, they, referring to the female broadcasters, are all looking at each other and now saying, how did we let this happen? And he says, I suspect they let it happen because they weren't doing anything about it. All right. He also, just from his kind of male-dominated perspective, says it's just a difference between men and women. Men go after promotions, they go after leadership, and women are just less proactive, right? And asking for more money. And, even he mentions that he's had a lot of women reporting to him in his career. And they come to talk to him about their careers, either for guidance and mentorship. And he said in this report, I have never, ever had a woman ask me for a raise. So kind of striking, right? And so I always raise this question, who thinks this is true? Think about these questions. Are the women to blame? Is this fair, in fact, that they were being underpaid? And I want you to think about, how would you react in this situation? And then finally, have you heard of or experienced similar situations before, right? So, I think this story brings a lot of emotions when I typically share it. And just for time, I'll focus on, let's focus on, are the women to blame? Because in this report, it seems that Sir Philip here is blaming the women because he uses his empirical evidence of having mentored women and saying that they've never asked for a raise. Are the women to blame? Anybody has any feedback they want to share or any thoughts around that? And Janelle, maybe we can just check out the chat.
Yeah, so I'll keep an eye on the chat. We'll give it a few seconds for the delay and then also for you all to think.
And I'll ask you, Janelle, what are your thoughts too?
Yeah, so my thoughts come from I feel like it's more of like a societal type thing of how people are raised. Because I know that for me and my sisters, nobody ever was really just you should go for why aren't you asking for more. It was always kind of more of a, and not anybody's intention, but more of this underlying understanding, which it's strange to think about, but I don't think that the blame falls solely on the marginalized genders, but I think that, and maybe you think the same based off of the title of the workshop, but I think that there are steps that we can take to empower ourselves in this field. So
yes, well, great. Thanks for sharing, Janelle, because I think I heard a couple of things. I heard, it seems, there's a system, right? This is the society, a lot of fields, and I would say STEM fields in particular, since, you're attendees and this is a STEM conference, a science-based conference. Women and minorities and other minoritized groups are generally fewer in these fields. And so there's a structural piece here, right? And then there's a kind of, how we, I like to say, how we are all raised, right? Women, if you think about the perception, if we just focus on women and men, the differences between little boys and little girls, if we just start there, girls are supposed to be petite and dainty, and, they should not be loud and boisterous, right? And these are the things that we advocate in little boys, right? This is what society teaches little boys. Oh, it's okay if he's rambunctious. But sometimes it's that empowerment of being forthright and having that fortitude is what gets you to negotiation, right? To ask.
Right. And we have some comments based off of what you said, and then also answers to the first question. Based off of what you're talking about, Lisette said, I personally used to think that we had to settle for what we are offered. And then as far as are women to blame, again, Lisette said, no, some women may not know that they can ask for a raise. Natalie said, definitely don't think women should be blamed for being put in this position.
Yeah, I agree with all three of those. Those are all three very insightful comments. Women are not to blame, right? Women don't know. Some people, just some people in some groups, and isn't, again, not just women. You may be a first generation college student and you made it through college and now it's time for the real job. And you just don't know the idea of negotiating, right?
Right. Eileen adds that I think there is a chance that some women working here might have asked for a raise and would have gotten some bad feedback on this request, causing other women to not try anymore.
Oh, That's an interesting perspective. I don't think I've heard that one before, but I like that, right? So the door has been shut on, one woman who may be senior or somebody that's asked, and so everyone else is in the group of, we're not going, in the mindset that we're not going to ask, because if they told her no and she is a rock star in this company, then I don't have a chance, right?
Right. Jenny also says, I do not think women are to blame. I remember someone mentioned the reason why women do not have equal pay is due to women marrying and having kids and taking maternity leave. The male colleagues stay and earn their raise, and they need support or feel like they do not have, and they being women feel they do not have the support in the first place.
That's interesting. Yeah, so policy at the company may be viewed as kind of penalizing the women, right? You're not there. I know this, I'm in academia, right? And it's like this constant perception that, junior, early hirees, they're supposed to be in their office day and night, right? Just proving that they have the right stuff to make it to be tenured, right, as a professor. These are the types of things and the stereotypes that kind of persist. And, I'm going to really say that, you know, there are other factors at play here. And I think you all are alluding to those other factors. Um, we're scientists. I like research. And so there is research in this area, right? So here's an example. I don't, so this is from a group of two women, Babcock and Levershey. They wrote this book, Women Don't Ask, quite a few years ago now. And Babcock actually was a professor at a university in the Northeast in a business school. And so she was approached by a female graduate student about having the ability to teach, to be a teaching assistant in the department. That this woman had noticed, this female graduate student had noticed, oh, the department gives all of the men the teaching assistant positions. And as a result, when they finish graduate school, they're very marketable. They have all of this teaching experience. They're getting the jobs, and the women are paying the price for this, right? So, fortunately, um, um, the advisor, who is Babcock, she actually went to the department chair, who, by the way, happened to be her husband, and said, what's going on here? Why aren't these women, getting positions and teaching assistantships? This is going to help them with their careers. And the response was, they didn't ask. They didn't identify themselves as wanting to teach. So Babcock and Levershey actually started to brainstorm, and Levershey is a social scientist, and they, talked about this experience in this business school and said, well, let's design some experiments and actually test. Do women, this thing, women don't ask. So they actually did something called the Boggle experiment. And there's two experiments that they did. So they recruited students at their university and told them that they would be paid between $3 and $10 for playing the game Boggle. I don't know if you all know what Boggle is. Simple game. You mix up some dice. They have letters on them. You pour them out on the table. You spell out as many words as possible with the letters that are shown. Simple game, right? Anybody, a college student, can play this game. So there's not an advantage to men or women playing this game. And so, so each research subject was asked to play something like 4 rounds, and then the researcher handed the person $3 and say, here's $3. Is $3 okay? And then if the subject asked for more money, but they were not given any more money, or if he or she just complained about the compensation, that is what was recorded. So if you look in this first experiment, 23% of the male participants compared to only 3% of the female participants asked for more money, right? So think about all of those women right? All the 97% of the women that were in this experiment, they just took the $3 and thought, okay, right, this is fine. I played this simple game. I got $3. And so when you think about what are the factors that drove the men to want to ask for more money, they were just simply unhappy with what they were offered. And so that is what drove them to ask for more. So they took this a bit further, and then they took that same group and they asked them a separate question in a survey, and they asked, when was their next negotiation going to happen, and what is the likeliness that they would ask for higher compensation or ask for something more in the negotiation. And 54% compared to 17% of that same group that played the boggle game said that they would ask for more, right? 54% of men said that they would. So there's some potential drivers behind why men ask and women don't. And some of it is just kind of a natural response for women. Most of it is, I don't want to seem unhappy or complaining. But I think we can all agree we all want more, right? It's the fact that, how are we perceived when we ask for more? The key thing, though, is it's important that you negotiate and you ask for more, and we can take money, and salaries as a important kind of measurement of this. People, right? You think about people assume cost, and that equals value. What that translates to is that more lowly paid women are valued and promoted less often than their male counterparts. So, there's a cumulative effect of not asking over a career, and it can be substantial. Right? So this is one part, right? Women don't ask. And then the second part of this story is that there's in the system, right? Janelle and I had that kind of brief conversation, and her thoughts were there's some systematic things going on here. And here's a study by Moss and Roshan from University of Michigan, and they basically looked at did a double-blind study of science faculty at a research intensive university. And the faculty were asked to rate the application materials of a student. Some of you all may have experienced this because maybe you've applied to graduate school and your application went before a committee. In this case, this was an interview for the position of a laboratory manager, right? So we think about a laboratory manager, they have to lead the lab and help support the advisor. And the committee, right, the faculty that looked at these applications, what was noted is the starting salary that was offered for these male versus female students. Look at the starting salary for males. Males were offered somewhere on average of $30,000 compared to the female applicants, somewhere between about 26.5 they were offered. So women would offer substantially lower amount of money for the same level of work. So there's some kind of implicit bias that's in the system that's going on in the background. All right. So
we also have like a comment that just came up in chat. I don't know if you want to address it now or later, but Lizette said, I have a hard time negotiating because sometimes I feel my skills are not deserving of a raise. I don't want to ask for a raise and then disappoint.
Right. So that is, I think, one of the number one kind of perceptions women have of themselves. We read lots of stories. There's lots of research to show that men, even if they don't know what they're doing, they're quite confident. They exude confidence in the room. And women are often just as capable or more capable. And it's this perception that you don't think that you're a right fit for the job. Now, I mentor lots of women, and I tell them, you have the skills, right? You have the technical skills, particularly in the science area. It's how you promote yourself. And that, I always tell them there's no job in America that people are just going to drop you in and say, succeed, right? Just go for it, right? They don't want you to to do any damage to the company. So a lot of women think that when they go for an interview, that I need to have all of these skills, but you're going to be trained on the job. There's some onboarding period and some piece, to allow you to train and to figure out the culture of the company. And this is one of the things that I've kind of used to help some of my female students in particular and minority students combat some of those perceptions. So Lizette, hopefully that helps a little bit.
For sure. Thank you for that.
Okay. So, here's my kind of, I got a couple more gloomy slides. I know this feels like gloom, right? But I just want to give you a little motivation, right? When we think about our value when we negotiate, the things that are measurable are something like your salary. So those who negotiate their salary have a potential of increasing their lifetime earnings by $1 million. So what does that look like? That looks like if, let's say, coming out of college at age 22, and between males and females there's a gap of about $560. Negotiating constantly, right? And we can assume that there's a standard 2.7% raise. If you just follow that standard kind of 3% raise, then the gap between men and women is about 35,000 to 110. Asking for a raise consistently out your career, you can start with a salary as low as 36 and get to 213,000, let's say, by the time you're at age 65. That equates to about $2 million in lost earnings, right? And most women go their entire career without negotiating or asking for additional monies, right? So on the back end, early on in your career, not such a big deal, but as you mature in your career, the gap becomes huge, right? And that's a huge place, and that's not just negotiating initially, but also throughout your career. All right. And so, what we like to say is that view this as a one-time negotiation, which means at the start of your career, if you negotiate early on, you set yourself up as you may grow in that company or as you may switch to another company, you've already established your pay. I say that because there's data everywhere, right? You all are computer scientists. You can look up salaries and average salaries for companies across various types of databases. And so, when you go from one company to another, that company already has an idea. The new company already has an idea about your value at the old company before you come in, just because of the pervasive amount of data that's there. So you want to negotiate early on for the best salary to give yourself a good start. Just a little bit more statistics to kind of motivate you. I'm showing the 2019 U.S. Census Bureau data about the gap around race and ethnicity as well. And if we compare white men to women from different ethnicities and races, we all kind of have seen this data of how many cents on a dollar that women make. I like this statistic of, if I equate it to a man working a normal calendar year, for a Latino woman, for example, she would have to work an additional 293 days into the next year to make the same amount of money, right? So what we're saying is you have to work nearly a whole year to keep up for each year that a white male works in the workforce. So, that negotiation early on, again, is important. There's other places, and so I'm going to kind of go through this, kind of quickly. And so this kind of ties to the previous data. But we can go even break down, Black men, for example, are paid less than white women. Their Asian men are paid more than white males. Latino and Hispanic men and women are paid more lowly overall across the board. And so these are some of the things we want to combat. If you're a first generation student, there was a survey done in 2017. The wage gap between a first generation student and their peers who have had at least one parent graduate from college, even after 10 years, their starting salary was 12% lower than their peers, right? And then the expectations for a starting salary between a first generation and a non-first generation student differs. So first generation students were between 25 and 50,000 versus non-first generation students between 30 and 55,000 for starting salaries. So this is very important that we figure out what are the tactics we can do to negotiate. All right. So we want to address this pay gap. And I want to make sure everyone in the audience understands that you want to make sure you understand that pay gaps, what the pay gaps are more generally. Our goals really should have equal pay for equal work. So I am not arguing that this system that is in place is okay, right? We shouldn't even have to talk about strategies. We should demand equal pay for equal work. But negotiation is the tool that we have right now that can best help us close the gap. Right? And remember, equity is what we want. So I'm going to give you some quick tactics that'll help us, and then I'll leave enough room for some questions. I hope, Janelle. So just let me know, Janelle, when I have about 10 minutes or so.
Sounds good.
Okay, so there's a couple of take-home messages, right? There's techniques that you should focus on when you're carrying out a negotiation. You think of negotiation as like a tug of war. You have to think about what are your goals? What do you want out of the negotiation? What is your priority? I'm going to throw in this word empathize, because you always want to ask yourself when you're negotiating with someone, why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person try to get me to negotiate for a lower salary, right? So this is not about taking it personal, right? Maybe it's in the company or in the person's best interest that they see you as having a lower salary, but that's not what you want, right? And so you don't want to lose your cool in that moment when you're going back and forth with someone in a negotiation. And then there's some specific strategies. I'll talk about ZOPA, which is the zone of possible agreement. I heard someone talk about compromise earlier. So this is compromising. There's this acronym BATNA, which is the best alternative to negotiation. And then also your presence, right? What are you doing in that moment of the negotiation that helps with your strategies with a successful negotiation? So there's lots of books that talk about negotiation, but what are the goals? Let's talk about goals. What kind of tactics can you use in a negotiation? So you always want to make a plan, establish your priorities, and set high targets for yourself when you negotiate. Instead of focusing on the dreading moment of negotiation, instead of saying I want to survive this conversation or I want to survive this negotiation, rather what you want to say is I want to figure out how can I get what I want from this particular person, right? So don't focus on the negotiation if it makes you nervous. Focus on getting that person to meet your request. So, think about when you're negotiating for a car, since that was a good example. You might say, I'm so nervous about negotiating on the price of this car. I'm going to ask for it really fast and get it over with, right? Rather, you want to have that winning mindset. And instead, you should go into the negotiation of a car and say, I'm going to strategize. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to find the best price. And I'm going to get this car for the price that I want. And then this is where we bring in the BATNA, which is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And you ask yourself 4 questions. What must I have? What can I live without? What can I ask for instead? And at what point do I walk away? So if we take that car example of negotiating for a car and you use the BATNA, right, these 4 questions, it might go something like, I really need a car. That's your must have. and I can't pay over $20,000. However, I could live with a slightly used version, and I could forgo some of the upgraded features. And maybe I could offer up my truck as a trade in if I need to. But if I can't negotiate a 2020 vehicle or newer within my budget, I'm just going to walk away. Right? So you have to figure out, ask yourself those 4 questions and evaluate the situation even before you go in. You also want to write them down. So I didn't necessarily go in the order of these 4 questions. I thought about what are the things I need. I need a car. I only want to pay 20,000. I have a trade-in. I know what model I want. And so you need to rank them in priority of what's important to you. And that's going to help you figure out, when do you walk away? So, use that example. Think about, what would you walk away from in terms of the negotiation. So there's some key elements. When you negotiate, you never want to negotiate for one thing, right? So if you notice in the previous exercise, there was price, there was the model, there was, giving up another vehicle. What are the 3 options or 3 things you want to negotiate with? So go in with at least 3. You want to frame your request to show that the different interests in the parties, so between you and maybe the company you're negotiating a salary, know what the interests are of that company. So, again, so think about the issues. What are the things that drive you in the negotiation? What's going to make you have fight or flight, right? So, what are you going to fight for? What are the things that are going to throw you off balance, that are going to make you, walk away from the situation? You want to know, in that request, what's the position? So, in fact, when you negotiate with someone, do they even have the power to give you what you want? So you may ask your supervisor for a salary increase, but maybe they're not in control of the budget. And so that might not be the right person to be negotiating with. You also want to know the interests and needs of the person you're negotiating with. That could be a person, right? So it could be your supervisor. Maybe they need help with organizational tasks, or tying to the needs of the organization. Remember, if they're giving you money or you're asking for extra money, it costs them as an organization. What value are you bringing to the organization? So you want to remember those 3 kind of pieces. And there is always an expectation of giving and taking, right? That compromise. So let's talk a little bit about the strategy of presence. Your body language is important. So you don't want to be like this guy, like a fish out of water, and you're struggling in a negotiation. You always want to exude confidence. Your shoulders, whether you're standing or you're sitting, your shoulders are dropped back. Your chest is open, because as you open up and put your shoulders back, you're able to articulate and pronounce your words, and you're not struggling through the conversation. If you're standing, you want your feet grounded. So you want to have them slightly open, just so that you have a strong base, because, if you're closed up, you're much weaker. And there's a perception that the person you're negotiating with is, oh, I have this person off balance. I'm going to go in for the kill. I'm going to get what I want out of the negotiation. You want to take deep breaths. You want to breathe, because oxygen is important. It helps you think on your feet. And you want to keep a neutral expression, right? Your face is open, it's neutral. You smile with your eyes, right? This is the poker face. You don't want to give away what you're thinking. You don't want to give away the idea that you're fearful in that situation, right? And so I like to do a little practice exercise about your body language and facial expression. And so everybody, should take a look at the screen and just keep a neutral face as possible. I'm going to show you some images, but think about, in that moment, of maintaining a neutral face. So hopefully you probably experienced a whole range of emotions, but if you think about from sadness to anger to the cute little, our little baby character here, right? You want to maintain the same type of facial expression and body language throughout your negotiation. Other places where you want to work on communication, your communication skills leave a huge impression in your negotiation. This happens in one-on-one meetings, in a seminar, and what you should notice, people will remember very little of what you say and a lot about how you say it. So I'm certainly not advocating. I'm from New Orleans. I have a New Orleans drawl in my my dialect. It's about what are the words that you use and the type of communication that people are going to remember about you. You always want to stick to a few takeaway points whenever you're in a meeting. So in a talk that you give, no more than 3 points. When you go into a meeting or a negotiation, go with those three big things that you want to ask for and stick to that. You want to speak clearly, right? Speak from the diaphragm. Make eye contact. A great tip if you get nervous at looking people in the eye, if you actually look at their nose or you look at their mouth, more importantly, that's the better place. It looks like you're looking at them in the eye and it reinforces our language skills. Often, when you're looking at someone's lips move, you are actively listening. You're getting more out the conversation. You want to watch out for qualifiers. This is where women and minorities a lot of times overuse qualifiers. So let me give you an example of qualifiers and intensifiers. They're words or phrases that are added to another word to modify its meaning. So, for example, you might say, well, I am somewhat qualified. We saw that a little bit earlier about, how do I know if I'm qualified for this job? I may not have the right skills, enough skills. So you might say, well, I'm somewhat qualified. It's better to say probably I'm very qualified. And if you want to strengthen that even further, I am certainly qualified for this position. So you want to avoid those kind of uncertainty words. Qualifiers play important roles in discussions. So you never go in with, well, I think I can, I'm somewhat familiar, or I'm kind of familiar. You want to stay away from those words. You also, I won't talk about uptalk today, but you want to have a nice steady tone. Make sure that you talk with some confidence. You don't want to touch your face and your hair. If you're always worried about how you sound, a great tip is to cuff your hands behind your ears and to make like a little antenna and practice before you go into the negotiation so you know how you sound. That's the best way to hear yourself. And I like this little circle. What you want to do is make sure that you shorten your sentences, land your points, use the space of silence in between the response with the negotiation, the person you're negotiating with, eliminate those qualifiers and articulate your words. And most importantly, you want to remember to breathe in the negotiation.
So I wanted to let you know we are coming up on the end of the workshop. I have a question from chat.
Yes.
So Lisette asked, do employers know your salary at a previous company? I know you mentioned that your current salary can set the tone for jobs at other companies.
Yes, so that's a great question. They may not know. So there's lots of websites now like payscale.com. There's a couple of other websites, and I can share those resources with this group. But a lot of people, so if you're a state or federal institution that you're seeking to work at, your salary is most likely published somewhere. If it's a private company through websites like PayScale, people are self-reporting what they are making. So this is kind of the masses are getting together and reporting what they're making. And so people can kind of figure out what the average salary is. They may be able to go into the details and say, oh, I think this person is a man at this company, here are females. And so, I'm trying to hire someone who is female. They're probably making this lower end. They may have these general assumptions about your starting salary, in addition to the salary information they have within the company about what they are paying their current employees. But that's a great question.
And then I also just had a question that came up for me while you were giving this discussion is there any sort of adjustment or difference in your approach for when we do things online or over the phone or things like that, since we're now seeing a lot of companies go hybrid or stay online?
I think it's the same, right? So if it's by phone, the verbal communication, right? Articulating what the person is saying. A great strategy that I'll actually share is this listening strategy. So I'll go to this slide. If you're doing a phone or video interview, it's more important for you to focus. It's very important for you to focus on what the other person has to say. And so these three kind of parts of the ABEX, where we say acknowledge what they're saying, you empathize, and then you summarize in that conversation what the person is saying. That helps you to actively listen. So the kind of response, Janelle, that we think about is what we call mirroring. And I'll give you an example. So an employer might say, we are looking for a bright, energetic individual to join our company to help our cybersecurity division grow. How you respond to that, you want to pause and take the 4 seconds and you listen, and you want to say, so it seems like growth in cybersecurity division is a key strategy for you in the coming year. Here's what I can bring to your company based on my experience, right? So, you see, I'm mirroring, I'm reiterating, right? To show that I'm an active listener, whether on the phone or a video call, and I'm not using those qualifier words, right? I'm going to tell you what I can bring to your company. Those are, that type of communication is very important when you're doing kind of telephone interviews. Hopefully that answered the question.
Oh, yes, definitely. With an added example. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any further questions in chat. Is there any closing sort of remarks before I direct everybody to our next event?
Yes. So I'm just going to pull a couple of little things together. I didn't talk about zone of possible agreement, and then I'll close out. But there is what the last strategy is called ZOPA. And ZOPA really is, you have to figure out what is your lower acceptable limit and what's your upper limit. And I just talked about salary, but you could negotiate for salary, benefits, office space, professional development to help you grow over your career, right? So you can ask for more raises later on. Maybe you only want to work 4 days a week because you have a family. Those are things you can negotiate for. And you want to write out all of the things that you want in a job and use that as a starting place. So maybe they don't want to give you a higher salary, but maybe there's increased benefits. Maybe there's that professional development that in a year, for example, may help you to come back to ask for more money. So that's, the kind of last little tip that I have. And what I call my last slide is just putting it together is, remember, you want to set the right tone. Stress is the energy that you don't want to bring to the negotiation. Build affiliation. Do your homework on the company. Justify your request. If it's a small company with less than 25 employees, maybe asking for $200,000 a year is not the right thing to do, right? Focus on your targets that you want. Don't let yourself feel rushed in a negotiation. You can always say no in a moment and ask to come back to that particular problem while that particular negotiation point. And then remember, when you're going into a job interview or negotiation, you're there to help that person solve their problems. So make sure you have multiple options on the table. And finally, close the deal and the negotiation. And you do this by practicing. So I will close out there. I think we're right at 3 o'clock. Here's my email address. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I am happy to give advice. And thank you all again for inviting me to give a talk today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nash, for coming and speaking to us. I know throughout that presentation, at least me, I now like sit a little bit straighter, stand a little bit more confident. So we really appreciate it. Everybody in the chat, let's get some claps going for Dr. Kelly Nash. She is kind enough to share her info with us, so make sure to write that down if you want to keep that. But thank you so much for your talk.
You're welcome. And I'll share these resources, Janelle, if anybody wants the slides, and you all can share it.
Perfect. Yes, we will definitely share that out in our Discord.
Okay.
Perfect. So
Well,
now, everybody, let's go ahead and we'll find you all some teams if you don't have teams already with our next mini event. So we have a scavenger hunt that is going on, and I'm going to drop the link in chat. And then I will also drop the link to sign in into this workshop again. But go ahead, head over to that scavenger hunt, go meet some people here, and form your teams or start hacking.